I hopefully that does. Um, Key drivers in the operating budget: software as a service. We have a very specific piece of software that our tax collector and assessor use, and then there's the GIS mapping, and the companies that provide this software, particularly to municipalities, kind of know that there are very high switching costs. It's pretty difficult to get all your data in and out, and so sometimes those services increase higher than overall inflation. This is one of those years. Then, like everyone here, myself included, who makes a household budget, energy, that means heating oil, electricity, propane. I mean, they're all increasing by more than I think any of us would like, and sometimes for reasons, in fact, always for reasons well beyond our control. We can and have installed LED light fixtures. We've put heat pumps in the town hall. I mean, we're trying to keep a handle on our consumption, but the prices of energy have increased and continue to do so. Then we also increased the programming budget for Marlborough seniors. Again, it is a large and growing part of our population, and we're excited to better meet their needs than we have in some years past. There are also some election expenses. Last year was an off year in the sense that we had municipal elections, but this year we have a gubernatorial election and the congressional midterms. And I don't follow the politics as closely as perhaps I should, but at one time it looked like we were headed toward two primaries, one Republican, one Democratic for the gubernatorial election, in which case our registrars of voters would have to run two primaries and one general election with anticipated higher turnout than last year. It's not quite as high as we would get in a presidential election, but it is still higher than we had last year. And unlike when we did this 2 years ago, primaries are now required by Connecticut state law to have 1 week of early voting, and the general election has to have 2 weeks of early voting. So I'm not opposed to it. I think that it makes it more convenient. That's all wonderful, but that does mean that there have to be poll workers, available there, keeping the polls open for an extended period of time to provide that convenience associated with a strong democracy. Then we also, in response to some spirited commentary that I received about our cemeteries, we have increased the budget to mow the lawn more frequently, to sort of clean them up and keep them looking in better shape than we have in the past. And then you may have seen, if you didn't see it driving around, you may have seen it on Facebook. Our fire department recently took delivery of a new fire truck. We entered into a 7-year lease to own arrangement. So this year we'll be making the first of 7 payments toward that truck. In the 8th year, it will be ours. Key operating budget softeners: audit expenses. For the past several years, we have been catching up on frankly delinquent audits, and I'm pleased to report that we are within probably weeks of submitting our 25 audit, at which point we will be caught up, and then we look forward to submitting our 26 audit. That is the year that we are currently in, so it ends June 30th. And I have every reason to believe, particularly with our new finance director, that we will be able to successfully complete and submit that audit before December 31st, when it is due. Then we have also, or are in the process of entering into a regional agreement with the town of Woodbridge to share a finance director. And at the same time, we have applied for a grant from the state It's called an RPIP grant, a Regional Performance Incentive Program grant. And the state has made this money available to encourage small towns to regionalize and share services. And in fact, the finance director was one of those sort of high need positions that communities all over the state have struggled to find people to fill. That is a priority for that. If we are awarded that grant, and I expect that we will be, it's not official yet, but I anticipate it, then the state will chip in 50% of the total cost to hire for that finance director for the first 3 years. After that, it's still on us. We still save money relative to having our own finance director because we share those costs and the time with Woodbridge, but it is an especially good deal for the first 3 years. And then insurance. Thankfully, we have terrific employees who, even those who work with heavy equipment and are in positions that are sort of inherently riskier and more dangerous, they are very careful. We have not had very many workers' comp claims. We have not had a lot of insurance claims at all. And so our insurance premiums likely, we anticipate and we have budgeted a slightly lower amount this year than in years past. That's a big win. Oh. Then on the capital budget, in addition to the standard contributions that we make to our capital non-recurring reserves of general government, public safety, fire, public works, and revaluation, we're also looking at the following projects for FY26. One is the Quinn Road culvert construction. That is something that we planned on and in fact budgeted most of it for last year, but because of the budget cycle and the contractor's availability, by the time we bid out the work, it was too late in the construction season to do it. So we will be doing that early this construction season. And then we are also planning on lining the culvert that goes underneath Johnson Road. That is a double-barreled culvert, and the material that they're able to line it with is actually really impressive. And we anticipate that it will extend the life of that culvert, not just by a year or two, but by 40, 50 years at significantly less cost than a full replacement would be. But in order to do that, we need to line it before the culvert is so far gone that you can't repair it anymore and you just have to replace it at much higher cost. So we're really aiming to get in there soon. Then we are also looking at replacing the roof at Town Hall. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to find documentation of when it was last done. But as far as I can tell, it has been at least 25 years. And you may recall that in the past couple of years, we did use some federal ARPA money to put insulation up in the attic and replace the HVAC system pumps, which have, even though the heat pumps themselves are outdoors, there are air handlers up there. Right now, we have buckets in 2 places catching rainwater. And it is important to address that issue before we spring more leaks, before further damage is done to the building or any of the equipment, particularly that which we have just recently replaced. We're also looking at replacing the roof at the Public Works garage. It is not currently leaking. That's the good news. It was leaking recently, but we had temporary patches installed. And when the person went up there the contractor went up to repair the roof, kind of went, wow, this isn't like one roof. This is like 6 different roofs and they're all different materials. And that's not necessarily a problem. If it works, it works. It doesn't necessarily have to be beautiful, but that is, another example of a building. This is routine maintenance. parts of it, we're leaking recently, and we're looking forward to taking good care of it so that the people who work there and the equipment that we keep in there and keep safe is not damaged. Then in Firehouse 2, we have budgeted for some bathroom repairs, mostly kind of replacing showers and fixtures. The reason is that until about a year ago, when we installed new water softeners and a more advanced filtration system, the water that was coming out of the shower smelled really bad and discolored, the walls of the shower. And so many of our firefighters, much to my dismay, were choosing, when they came back from fighting a fire, they would go home and shower instead of showering at the firehouse. And that's a problem because then they expose their family members to, any residual ash or other materials that frankly we don't want their family. I mean, we're grateful for their participation and their volunteering for our fire department, and it is really important that they have a clean, reasonably comfortable place where they can get cleaned up before they go home and see their families. And that's what we're trying to do here. And then the food bank, which is located at 3 Willinger Drive, right on the corner of South Main Street. They do magnificent work for many of the most vulnerable members of our community. If you drive past there, you don't even have to turn into Willinger, even if you're just driving by on South Main Street. The exterior of that building has seen better days. The paint is really chipping off and flaking. And that's an issue not just for appearance, but also if you let it get too far gone, then the beautiful wood siding can get damaged. So we really ought to make a small investment in repainting that so that that siding is not damaged and we can continue to use that facility for its intended purpose. And then we're also looking at replacing 2 pieces of equipment. One is the trash compactor at the transfer station. As far as I can tell, that's about 35 years old. It does not owe us anything. And from what I understand, it is on its last legs. If it were to go out before we could replace it, then we would have to use like the backhoe or some other piece of heavy equipment to kind of smush the trash down in the dumpster as best as we could. That would obviously not be ideal. So we're looking forward to replacing that. Maybe when we get it, we could have a naming contest. Who wants to name the trash compactor? I don't know. I see a few of you who'd like to submit something. And then we are also asking for in F450 or similar pickup truck to replace one that has been in our fleet for, I think it's 12 or 13 years, has lots of miles on it, and frankly has just seen better days. Our crew use those trucks all the time to maintain our playing fields, Bush Park, to do road work, haul things. I mean, this particular request is overdue, to say the least. I would like to speak briefly about sort of the mill rate and how it's calculated, especially in light of this year when we had the property revaluation. So the mill rate is calculated by taking the levy, that is the amount of taxes that are approved at the referendum, which is tomorrow, divided by the grand list, which is the sum of the assessed value of all of the properties in town. The assessed value of most homes, the grand list, increased by a higher percentage than the proposed tax increase levy, causing the mill rate to decrease. So the mill rate last year was $37.74 per $1,000 of assessed value. That's the name mill rate. If the proposed budget passes, the mill rate will be $27.71. And I added this just this morning because our friends in Hartford love to change the rules of the game at the last minute. But in this case, this actually works to our advantage. This is good news. The Connecticut legislature passed state budget amendments, I believe it was on Saturday, that increased state aids to Marlborough by $148,719. The Board of Finance is responsible for setting the mill rate after the budget passes. So they set a mill rate depending upon whatever budget is approved. But if the Board of Finance chooses to apply the $148,719 to our non-tax revenues, then the mill rate would decrease to $27.54. And especially at this stage of the game, I don't think that the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Education are going to be proposing new expenses. That's really not where we are in the process. So I think that is what would be, that's certainly what I would recommend, is that they use this, oh gosh. Is that they use this revenue to lower the mill rate. And then since the real estate mill rate is below the motor vehicle cap of $32.46, then the motor vehicle mill rate will decrease to whatever mill rate the Board of Finance selects, whether it's $27.71 or potentially $27.54. And the assessed value of existing motor vehicles will also decrease because those decrease by 5% of the MSRP each year for the first 20 years until they get down to $500 and then it stays there. So what that means is that the assessed value of your home likely went up. For some of you, it went up a lot. But the assessed value of your car or cars went down, and the mill rate of those cars charged to those cars also went down. So so everyone will see a decrease in their motor vehicle taxes. So how many people have already done this exercise of going online and calculating your own taxes? Few of you? Okay. Then if it's all right with you, I'm going to skip over this slide. And if anyone has questions or hasn't done it yet, I'll stay after for a few minutes and I'll gladly kind of walk you through it. But I see some familiar faces who we've already been through this with. So this was the example that I showed you last time of a home with an assessed value very, very close to the median in Marlborough. So that is a home value or a market value, which is different from the assessed value. After the revaluation, the assessed value, in theory, is supposed to be very close to 70% of the market value. So in this case, the home would have a market value of $438,783. The assessed value, 70% of that, would be $307,148. So I actually found this home. It does exist, but I don't remember the address, so don't ask. And last year, pre-assessment, it was assessed at $213,958. And then I calculated its tax based on last year's mill rate. And then I put in, I didn't look up what cars they actually had, but I said, okay, if they have two cars, and just for fun, I said, okay, we're going to say these are 2021s with an original MSRP of $35,000, and to make the math easy. So last year, their assessed value of that vehicle would be $18,375. The taxes on each of them would be $596. And then this year, for each of those vehicles, the assessed value dropped to $17,150, and the mill rate came down. So the taxes on those vehicles is 472. So, and by the way, I updated this with the new mill rate. So a few weeks ago when I did this, we were using a mill rate of 28. And then I updated it to 2771. And then this morning I had to update it again to 2754. But what that means is that this median home of their real estate only sees an increase of 4.76%. Once you subtract out the two motor vehicles, because each car decreases by $124, then the net increase is 1.47%. Now, after the last public hearing, when we heard about a lot of people whose homes increased by a whole lot more than that, I went back and I will not tell you who it is, but I selected someone who has come to our meeting and voiced frustration. So I said, okay, I'm empathetic, and I still am, even after doing the numbers. So please, but I said, let's do this. So this is a much more expensive home. This home has a market value of $703,300, which 70% of that means that the assessed value is $492,310. So I looked up that home. Last year, before the revaluation, the assessed value was $324,040. And so what that means is that year over year, their real estate taxes are slated to go up 10.87%. Now, I'm empathetic. If that doesn't take your breath away, that's a lot. Okay, I'm not suggesting otherwise. But for this person, I also went in and looked at the vehicles that they own. So these are actual cars associated with this address. And these are the amounts that their vehicle taxes will be reduced year over year: $166, $161, and $112. And when you net those out, their net tax increase is 6.22%. Still a lot. That is a lot of money. I am not making light of that. I want to be clear that I am empathetic, but it is significantly less than the almost 11% that you get before you factor in the motor vehicles. This chart shows the percent change in real estate tax bills before and after the revaluation. So as you can see here, this is the largest line, and that is for those that are increasing year over year between 0 and 5.99%. Then the second highest bar is between 6.0 and 11.99%. And then we keep going up by sixes until the highest, which is 25% and higher. Now, when you look into these outliers, right, the 25% higher and the 25% lower, there's usually something else going on with those properties. In this case, it's often, it was a vacant lot before. Now there's, a 4,500 square foot house on it. So there's often a good reason why those taxes went up. For some of these, some of them are vacant lots, some of them are small. And bear in mind that if you look at our mill rate going from 37 to 27, that is a 26, almost 27% decrease. So if someone's taxes are going down by 25%, and there are a few people who that does apply to, then that basically means that their property increased only a very, very modest amount. And in some cases, that could be, okay, the land increased, but then they used to have a home or a barn or something on there and they tore it down. So there's no longer a structure, or there's a house and a barn and they tore down the barn because it was decrepit and they didn't want to maintain it anymore. So On the extreme ends, there are usually good and valid reasons. Then there are much smaller numbers of people who are getting a tax cut year over year. And this is before you factor in the motor vehicles. This is just on the property, the real estate. But bear in mind, that means that their property increased by less than the 27% that the mill rate decreased by. That's how you get even a modest negative value. So there are a lot of reasons for that, but that's part of the revaluation process, is trying to make an admittedly imperfect system. It may surprise you. I'm glad you're already sitting down, but your town manager thinks that property taxes are a lousy way of collecting taxes for a whole variety of reasons. It's kind of got smushed a little bit. This is what you're looking at. So there's some on the table if you didn't grab it on your way in. But what I want to draw your attention to, welcome to look at all of it. But if you look at, in this top section, which deals with revenues, the last line says tax levy. And then if you look at the third column from the right, it says state aid budget. I struggled with what to call that because of this late breaking news from the state legislature that, turns out they want to get reelected in November and they're throwing some more money our way. So I couldn't call it like Board of Selectmen budget because we didn't have time to meet today to approve it. Couldn't call it Board of Finance budget because they haven't met yet. So as a placeholder, I called it state aid budget, just to make it clear. And that is where, if you look at the two state of Connecticut lines, both education and other, they increased by the amount that the state increased their allocation to us. And what that has the effect of doing is offsetting some of the tax levy. So if we have more, I hate to call it non-tax money because we know where the state's money comes from, but it is not part of the Marlborough property tax levy. So if it comes in from state revenue, then we can reduce the tax levy by the same amount. And so when I did that, the year over year percent change, which you can see right here, is 1.99%. And that is a remarkably small year over year increase. And it is a testament. I realize this is small consolation for those of you who are looking at the revaluation and experiencing property tax bills. And I don't begrudge you feeling frustrated, angry, or any other emotion that you might feel about it. But this figure, this 1.99%, represents a lot of hard work by my team, by me, by the members of the Board of Selectmen, and by our counterparts on the education side, by our superintendent, by our Board of Education members, and the Board of Finance. I mean, this really is a remarkable number to come in under 2%. Realize it's just a hair under 1.99, but to come in under 2%. So frustrations with the property tax system. This is by no means an exhaustive list. I'm sure we could sit here and come up with lots of other reasons to be frustrated with it. But a few that immediately came to mind. You get taxed annually on an asset that hasn't been bought or sold in many years. That's frustrating. I find it frustrating. There's a weak relationship between the market value of the property and the owner's ability to pay the tax. At least with an income tax, you can say, okay, I made more money this year, so I'm going to be taxed more. Or I retired and I made less money this year, so my taxes are going to go down. There's a strong correlation, a relationship between those things. Not so with property taxes. That's frustrating. And then the once every 5-year revaluation process is intended to maintain or restore fairness, and I'm using air quotes, across all property owners. But despite its good intentions, it can impose very high increases in the most desirable real estate markets. And that is in part what we are seeing here, here in Marlborough and particularly in some areas of our town. But I would like to remind you in closing, before I turn the time over to Dr. Hageman, that the referendum tomorrow is not a referendum on the revaluation. I realize it's difficult to separate those two things out, especially when in your mind you're saying, okay, how big is the check I'm going to have to write when this tax bill comes out? I understand that. But bear in mind that the referendum is not on the revaluation. That's on, who pays the total tax bill and how we get to that total number. The referendum tomorrow is on the budget. The proposed, oh my gosh. The proposed tax levy is increasing 1.99%. Further reducing that figure, if the referendum fails tomorrow, impacts our ability to replace very old equipment, to maintain our buildings and our streets, and doing so would have only a very small impact on those property owners who experienced high increases due to their property assessments. In other words, if we vote no tomorrow and reduce the 1.99% to something even lower, then we will see tangible impacts on, I won't speak for the school, but I will speak for the town, on our ability to, purchase a much needed truck to replace a very old one that we use, routinely to do work that benefits everyone in this room. It impacts our ability to replace the roof on the town hall, which literally has 2 buckets under it in 2 different places to catch drips when it rains. So it has those impacts. But if we were to further decrease this, your tax bill, and I'm very empathetic. I'm not ever going to tell you how you should feel about it, but further increasing this would have only a very modest impact on your property tax bill, because the bulk of that increase is not due to runaway spending or an out of control budget. It's due to the revaluation and a shift in burden from some people in town to other people in town based on market conditions that were evaluated following a strict process set out in state law. So again, very empathetic, but would encourage you as you decide how to vote tomorrow to remember that the referendum is not on the revaluation, it is on the budget. Thank you.
David, it's Jack with the Board of Finance. I had just a quick clarifying question, if that was okay.
Yeah.
The green bar graph that you had shown about the distribution of each bracket of tax increase or decrease,
Yes.
was that residential property only or residential and commercial?
I believe that included all properties, so that would be residential and commercial.
Thank you.
Do you need?
I've been on that also, on that same topic.
Where is yours? Okay.
I'll find it.
Okay.
David, just one clarification, based on also what Jack just said. Wasn't it true that commercial properties only went up value about 20%, residential not like 8%?
I believe that the average residential was closer to 40%, maybe 45. but I would have to check with Simon on that. And the average commercial property was less than that. But as a real estate professional, I'm sure that you know that commercial property in the post-COVID world is very different than it was before. I mean, you can drive through towns not even that far from us and see lots of vacant space available or rent or lease, because frankly, we live in a world in which we order things on Amazon, they get delivered to our front doorstep. Companies that used to maintain offices where you go to work every day, now have work from home policies 3 days a week, and so they need less office space. And so it does not surprise me that the commercial real estate increased by less than the residential real estate, because that's what is happening in the broader market. So the fact that that happened, though it is frustrating, suggests to me that those who were responsible for performing the revaluation actually did their job very well. The other piece that I think this relates to is that we are very fortunate to have a beautiful grocery store and the Three Fellas Plaza and a whole bunch of other commercial properties. But Marlboro, for decades, has been an overwhelmingly residential community. So even if the commercial property, and I don't know for sure, but it seems like based on the conversations that I have with many of our residents, there is a strong desire to keep it that way. And to sort of maintain call it what you want, character of Marlboro. So even though the assessed value of the commercial properties increased by less than on average than the residential properties, the commercial properties also account for a very small slice of the grand list.
Less than 10%.
I'd have to look, but yes, probably. So let's not make too much out of this. I mean, even if the commercial properties had increased by more and had gotten much closer, to the increases in residential properties, it still probably would not have had an outsized impact on the taxes paid by the residential property owners, because they account for only a very small percentage of the overall grand list.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for doing the scrolling for me. I'll try to be brief, and I wouldn't mind at all taking questions along the way if you have any when I have a certain slide on the screen, just so I can confirm the meetings. I'm Holly Gaven. I'm the superintendent of schools. Thank you for coming out. So this is a typical slide for us. The school budget is constructed to really be able to support the goals and objectives that are outlined in our strategic improvement plan, which is known as our STIP. And you can take a look at the STIP. It's on our school district website. And we talk about all our actions, philosophies, etc., all aimed at meeting students' needs. The budget helps us to have educators who work tirelessly for children in a growth-oriented learning environment. We support students' academic, emotional, and behavioral needs. We also have a robust special education and related services staff to really, again, meet kids where they are and provide them with the supports that they may need. And it helps us to keep our children with special needs in our school being educated in what is known as the least restrictive environment and not needing children out of school. So we've been doing a very good job with that. And of course, the school budget supports the finances necessary for books, materials, and the technology that's supporting education. In addition to that is a key asset for the town of Marlboro. Next slide, please. We have demonstrated an excellent return on investment And what that means is, while the Marlboro School District, this school, spends less per pupil than comparative districts, we get very good results from our students. And that's kind of exactly what objectively folks should be looking at. Bang for the buck, if you will. We are a school of distinction, which is a state designation, and there are a whole bunch of parameters that go into that calculus, but that's a great source of pride and I think that work for us. We have a model foundational reading program. We really believe that all children can and must be effective readers and writers, and we really have a very strong foundational program. We're a model district for the state. We've hosted countless school districts coming to visit us here in Little Marlboro. You know, our name has gotten out there for what we've been doing in reading for the last 3 years, and our student results are showing the results of those investments in material resources, professional development, and a consistent delivery of the intended curriculum. Our math results continue to show positive student outcomes. We have a robust specials program from Spanish beginning in kindergarten, art, music, PE, and health, a very well-resourced library, and we now have a guaranteed STEAM program. STEAM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. All of our students K through 6 have STEAM once a week, and it's a really awesome integrated program where kids are coming up with questions, designing experiments, iterating on designs, working collaboratively. Kindergartners, I mean, it's really cool to see, because we really believe that all kids are capable of really creative thinking. And if they get that energy and they get that enthusiasm and believe in themselves as creators and thinkers and collaborative and add value, that stays with them. And we really want this is our first year of having STEAM in that capacity, and it's going really, really well. And of course, we are award-winning in our choral, instrumental, and visual arts program. The art show is coming up very soon. I think it's the same evening as the board meeting, which is the 14th. So come on out to the art show. It's held in the community room, and it's open to the public. Thank you. So when I talked about comparing ourselves with school districts, we are in what is known as DERG-C. DERG is an acronym for Demographic Reference Group. It's based on a whole bunch of socioeconomic factors about Marlboro, Graham, Hebron. You can see all the schools that are DERG-C. And you'll notice where Marlboro is, we are 29th out of 30th in per pupil spending. So, you know, it's not an inexpensive number, and a lot goes into it. It's definitely by the state government and the Connecticut Department of Education. And you can, and again, you see where we are. But in all fairness, as I said in the last period, any district that has a high school in it is going to be spending more per pupil. A high school is just a much more expensive endeavor. It's a much wider array of courses, because we really want to be able to have a comprehensive high school course offering. So in all fairness, it's not totally fair for us to compare ourselves with districts that have high schools. So we did, and by the way, the yellow that you see here highlighted is going to connect to an upcoming slide, because all of the yellow highlighted districts within this DERG-C are also pre-K through 6 exclusive districts. But you're going to see that in another slide. Next slide, please. So here we are, just comparing ourselves with the pre-K through 6 school districts, the 1 school districts in the state, all across the state. There are 16 of us. And here, once again, you see we're second to last in spending by this somewhat more fair comparison, more fair in terms of school structure, not necessarily fair in terms of economics, but either which way, it's another comparative where we are spending less than other places. Yet, we are fourth out of that same 16 in our student performance. And the school districts that are performing, slightly better than we are. This is an accountability index. Again, it's a whole bunch of parameters that go into a school report card that comes out annually. The only districts that recently outperformed us are Bethany, which is a Derg C. So it'd be interesting to know what's that to do it. I will be contacting Bethany and say, what are you doing that we're not doing? Or whatever. Woodbridge and Orange. Interestingly, Bethany, Woodbridge, and Orange they all feed into the Amity School District. But Bethany is in Derg C, and Woodbridge and Orange are Derg B. And Woodbridge and Orange are also slightly outperforming us. So pretty cool what's going on in Woodbridge, Orange, and Bethany. And I would venture to guess that Amity probably down there as well. But we're very proud of how we have grown in our overall index over time post-COVID, and a lot of really children come to school really well prepared, really well cared for. We have wonderful families, care for their children, a beautiful community that supports their youngest citizens. So that's return on investment. This is just a graph of what I just described, and I've got to get better at doing this sort of scatter plot. But on the x-axis, you can see the per pupil expenditure from high to low, as high as $46,000 per pupil to getting down to $19,000. So it's quite a spread. And then the x-axis, the y-axis has the accountability index. And so you want to be in the upper right-hand quadrant, and that's where we are. And we have been now for a couple of years running. This is a trend now, not a one-off. When we develop our budget annually, we review and prioritize our initiatives. We take into account state mandates, which are often unfunded. We look at our contractual obligations, and that all feeds in. We analyze line items based on expenditure, and if we've been under budgeted significantly, we need to be more realistic about how we budget. If we've been over budgeting and we've not been spending year over year in that line, we will reduce that line. We go through every single line operationally. We determine our staffing needs based on projected enrollment. We work with a demographer, which is NESDEC, different from NASDAQ. NESDEC, New England Association. Another acronym, it's like acronym soup tonight. But we use NESDEC for enrollment projections, and then we also look at our student needs, our learner needs in any particular grade level, and we adjust accordingly. We do prioritize a commitment to class sizes that we feel are really beneficial to student learning, to teacher-student relationships. If we have a high expectation for all of our students and a high expectation for our teachers to meet the needs of all of the children in the classroom, having manageable and effective class sizes does help a lot. And so there's a longstanding commitment to that. As I mentioned before, we also take a look at our special education staffing relative to students' IEPs, another acronym, Individualized Educational Plan, and we adjust accordingly. And of course, our facilities needs, which for this coming budget year are limited to the things that need to get done. This is separate from the Public Building Committee that will be looking at a more comprehensive, well, a roof and an HVAC system, essentially. Because the roof, this is not for this budget cycle, but just foreshadowing. The roof is beyond its lifetime. It's well beyond its warranty. It's holding up. We don't have buckets. Every spot, not every day. But the roof is going to need to be replaced, and it's a large square footage. And the HVAC system, which is now about 25 years old, is also sort of working, and mostly not. And since so many of the units, air handling units, et cetera, associated with the HVAC system are on the roof, you don't replace your roof and then pierce it again, and you ruin your warranty. So you have to do those things. That's the long and short of what that project's slated to be for another set of a lot of community meetings led by the building committee that is just starting to take shape. Thank you. So the long and the short of our enrollment projections compared to class sizes is that these are for our number of classrooms. And in pre-K 6, essentially no change. Some grade levels may change, some grade levels may go up, some grade levels may go down in terms of the number of teachers. That's all really enrollment driven. But the net change from this year's number of classroom sections is a net zero change. Stop me at any point. So this is the bottom line. This was my proposed, well, actually, this wasn't my original proposed budget. I should have changed the title. This is what the budget became. And it is a 400,000 and change increase in operating, which I'll talk to a little bit in upcoming slides. It's a 4.49% increase, which is higher than we would have wanted it to be. But you'll see in a few moments that about 2% of that was something we couldn't control for, which was the unusually high premium renewal increase for the region's health insurance codes. And the capital budget, which I'll talk about briefly, is relatively small and $5,000 plus last year. This is our operating budget history, sort of kind of around the same ballpark. I really never thought, honestly, when I composed my original budget, that we'd be at a 4% range. I was coming in lower than that. And then the insurance cloud got a little darker, a little darker, a little darker, and it is what it is for now. But just to give you a sense of where have we been for the last 5 years or so. So the wage, it's not atypical at all in a school budget that wages and benefits are the lion's share of the budget. That's not new. It's just that the proportion of the driver of the insurance was unusual. So the wage increases account for 2.36% of the 4.49 budget. That's really not unusual. It would have been higher than that, but again, we analyze all of our positions at every staffing level every year, and we do have a reduction in headcount of 6 positions, and that's because it's kind of a long story, but we created other positions, and we don't need those other positions and about 6 other positions. So we could afford to do that without diminishing services to students. And just so that nobody gets nervous about that, we think that change in 6 FTE will be by attrition, because every summer in our non-certified staff, we hire about 7 to 9 people. People move on, they they go back to school, they move out of the state, they become teachers. So it's not a problem and it was doable. We also went from what is currently a 2 principal model back to a principal assistant principal model. And we even reduced the assistant principal model from a 12-month position to a 10-month. Because we do need 2 building administrators. There's a lot going on every day in this pre-K through 6 school, but not necessarily in the summer. And so we just felt that we could make that important adjustment. And that savings of going back to an assistant principal and making it 10-month is about a $40,000 savings. On our budget, that's a significant.
Just for the, going back to the assistant principal?
Yes.
40,000?
Correct. And from 12 months to 10 months. So it's a combination of a lower wage and a shorter contract. Sure.
Run again, we got a reduction of 12 full-time employees.
6.
6, I'm sorry, 6 full-time.
Yes.
I can't see that. But I don't see any reduction in there yet for that.
I apologize that,
I think you ran by, you got rid of some, hired others.
yeah, so it, I can't remember offhand, but it's about 25,000 times 6, if anybody can do that math. It's about $25,000 per, so 150. Thank you, our engineer, our mathematician.
For the math team.
I see that.
So it's really not a reduction.
It is a reduction.
Reduction in the headcount of 6 full-time employees.
Is a $125,000 savings of what I might have otherwise put forth.
This is something you want to put there.
I agree. I apologize. I agree. Very good point. The high increase of $197,000 for the 21% increase in the premium renewal is that's a really big number that we don't figure out. Hopefully you all continue to see that. That is driven consortium-wide by claims, but also the high cost of the stop loss coverage. Across the consortium, there are many high-cost claimants, and I think I said this last time. Insurance companies are not nonprofits, and so if they're paying out a lot, your premiums go up, and they get it. And so the broker for the consortium is still shopping that rate around for the stop loss, but we didn't have a different number at this point pre-referendum to bring a change forward. But that is actively being looked into. In addition, I don't know if I said this last time, the East Hampton Public Schools right next door, they're going to be joining the consortium, and based on their claims history and some other things, that's a good add because you're making the pool larger, and it's structured very well. They'll be paying into the reserve and all of the things that need to happen to make that happen. But that's good. That will help. It doesn't help immediately. It doesn't help this year. But overall, that was a fortuitous situation. So between wages, 2.36 increase, and insurance, 2.21 of the overall 4.49, everything else in the budget accounts for minus $8,000. So it's wages and benefits. Next slide. So this is just, again, just to give you a little bit of historical of what the premium renewal has been. Some years have been amazing, -6%. I mean, I don't know. I think people still weren't, coming out of COVID, maybe still weren't going to the doctor. or getting, surgeries that they might have been putting off, or I don't really know, but that was, I'd never seen anything like that. A 1.5%, I mean, crazy, crazy good, and then not so good, and then pretty good, and not good again. I mean, it's all over the place, a lot of different variables. But just to give you a sense of that's been what's been going on in that realm. Thank you. So that was an overview of capital. Get to the operating budget. I'll get to capital in a moment, but I do want to mention, if you're interested, our budget detail is on the school district website. Go to our website, www.marlboro, or just Google it. But don't go to Marlboro, Massachusetts. People confuse us a lot. There's a budget tab, and if you go to it, you will see the operating budget line item detail, as well as this presentation and a prior presentation. Okay. For the capital request, we requested, and David built into the overall town budget, $30,000 for an OPM, an owner's project manager, to be able to work with the public building committee that is forming to really assist the public building committee. Thanks. In bringing forward ultimately what would go for a referendum for the bonding for what extract for in terms of food and aid. And so it's really helpful, and it's pretty standard practice now to have an OPM because this is what they do for a living, is working with public entities. They know all of the grant parameters, and it just really helps to facilitate some support the volunteers who have volunteered to be on what we're calling the MESPC. The Southwest egress and demolition and replacement. When the school was renovated, there was an egress that was built, and I wasn't here then. It was 25 years ago, but it wasn't built well, and it's been eroding and evolving over time. We do need to rebuild it because it is a necessary egress for fire code. And it's based on hallway distance and distances to other exits. It does have to be rebuilt. If it didn't have to be rebuilt, we would have torn it down and we put it up, but it does have to be rebuilt. And the cost, that's an actual cost of $160,000 to do that. But we had proposed that money get moved from what was a school roof reserve, which had a balance of, I believe, 160,000. It was 140.
Yeah.
We asked that 120 come out of that and go towards this egress, so that the new money, if you will, that's in the budget as part of this whole package that voters will be coming out for tomorrow, is a $40,000 cost. That request went to a town meeting. It was approved, so it went through all of the proper actions for that. And the reason why we felt that $140,000 of taxpayer money that went into build up didn't need to stay there is because the roof needs to be replaced, and $140,000 is not going to replace the roof. So it's sort of kind of silly that it sits there when it's needed more urgently for something that needed to be demolished and rebuilt yesterday. And that project would start this summer. So the total request of the 30,000 plus the 40,000 is the 70,000 that's been built. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes.
This is more of a curiosity. Do we still provide teachers with a $300 allowance school supplies?
We have a supply budget. The $300 is something that PTO, provides to each.
Okay, I knew somebody.
Yes, not us, but
Okay.
we have a wonderful PTO, very creative, very generous. And so we haven't increased our budgetary supply line for as long as I've been here, which is 5 years, and I don't know before that, but we've been able to make do, and in part thanks to the generosity.
That's another question. Next one's five. I'll just call it office. Are we looking for the best price? I mean, are we buying stuff from Staples or are we getting stuff from Walmart?
We do contract purchasing, and so there's a consortium that we buy from for school supply. So we're not just,
It's a consortium.
yes, we don't just go out and buy it top dollar.
Thank you.
Well, other questions? Yes, please.
I have a question for the town manager.
Here I am.
Thank you very much.
This senior center. The surrounding towns. Fine. Is the only town that does not supply lunch for the seniors. We were having it 3 days a week, but for the last 2 years, not at all. And also, we have a part-time driver. We have a new car, and we have the bus. For a part-time driver who works 3 days a week, now he's down to 2. When are we getting another driver?
We have budgeted for 3 days a week of a driver, and so I would anticipate that when the budget passes, advertising, when we make sure that that funding will be available on a go-forward basis, that we will advertise for and hire a part-time driver for that 1 day a week.
Will that cover 5 days a week? For the 2 of them?
No, if the current driver is 2, and then we add 1, that would be 3 days a week, which historically is what we have had.
Originally, we had enough drivers for 5 days a week early on.
I'm not going to
Before you
argue
came.
with you, that may have been the case.
I know what has happened.
So based on the demand, the number of people calling and requesting rides, I don't think that we need a driver 5 days a week. But if we continue at 3 days a week and monitor demand, then I could see us, not this year, but over the course of the next budget cycle, gradually increasing that to 3.5, even 4 days. Because if you look at our demographic trend line, the number of seniors is a growing part of our overall population. So yes, I think it's something that is worth monitoring and adjusting as.
Well, we have 2 vehicles. One is just sitting.
That is true. One of the reasons that we are planning budget passes on hiring a 20-hour part-time assistant is so that that person can spearhead and organize a series of off-site field trips. Perhaps they could, that would not be part of the regular, I need a ride to my doctor's appointment.
Right, I
That
agree.
would be, hey, while our driver is taking someone to the doctor's appointment, there can be 5 other seniors who have signed up to visit the art museum, and they're gonna jump in the van, and the part-time assistant will take them to the art museum.
That's what we were used to years ago.
Well, that is not the exclusive reason that we're hiring a
Right.
part-time assistant, but it is one of the things that Shauna described to me as wanting.
And from you?
To the best of my knowledge, the meals used to be provided by a regional organization and their federal funding was. So that's why we used to have meals and we do not any longer. I'm certainly, and I do think that, there are still, I'm not double check this for Shauna, but, seniors who are kind of housebound or otherwise among the most needy and still, have meals delivered to their homes. But, I am open to, and Shoshana has also done a magnificent job planning kind of monthly activities, often that involve at least a light meal. St. Patrick's Day lunch, a Thanksgiving dinner. You know, 3 times a week. I'm not trying to suggest that it's like it used to be, but there are quite a few events that involve meals and food. And I think that it really hinges on what our community wants and what our community is willing to pay for. We used to be able to do that, but with federal support that today does not exist. So if we want to do that, then we have to demonstrate our willingness to pay for it. I mean, I'm happy to do anything that our community is willing to pay for, but I don't see that happening in this one.
Because the other towns around, they supply meals, they're $3. We're the only town in this area that does not. Thank you.
That's right.
Deanna. Everyone going to. We have a couple of questions, but the next year's question. Just so I don't keep, like, bringing on. For the schools, I'll probably ask next year, has there been an increase in the percentage of children who are getting free and subsidized meals? We'll keep track of that now. But looking at the taxes, would there, the percentage increase? I'm not sure if they keep track of this now, but I hope they would start with the food. We get an idea as to if there's going to be any increase next year, the number of clients. Taxes.
So if these are questions for next year, maybe I should answer them next year, but.
Right, I'm not looking for, but I don't know if they keep track, I know schools keep track of their stuff, I'm not sure.
They probably do, but there is something that is important. The town provides the facility, but the food bank operates independently of the town. Set donations, there are no tax dollars do not go to purchasing
It would
food.
be nice to know if they,
I agree that it would be nice to know, but they're not subject to the same Freedom of Information Act requests that a publicly funded organization.
I want, you made a quote 3 times already tonight. Remember the large and growing senior population in the town. Please do that with the tax. Thank you. See how calm I look?
You're getting better.
Any other public comment?
Just looks like Jack and Anthony.
Does anyone online have any questions? Public comment?
Nope, good here. Thank you, guys.
What's that? No.
That's it. None here. Thank you.
Thanks. Board? Thank you everyone for. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I hope the information was helpful. Board.
There you go.
Thanks, everyone.